Ken and I would just continue to pick up where we left off there just a little bit.
Well, some of the folks online were talking about ride sharing and carpooling. That came up tonight. It's been a tough sell in this area. I mean, a lot of it is based on some of the topics we've talked about. Diffuse population, not many people living near the same place, in the same place, going to the same place. I know that the people at rideshare, the ride finders, are always very vigilant about trying to get the public energized about that, but it just hasn't quite happened yet.
I also wonder, though, if that's if there's a deficiency in leadership and vision there. For example, I know that the South Grand area just did a survey to see what the demand was for car sharing. It was very high. But when you looked at the numbers and what they would have to pay monthly to subsidize it, it's just a cost that they can't incur. So I wonder, shouldn't we be thinking regionally? Like, what if we got a couple of these going and kind of pooled resources? I think there may need to be a larger strategy, and I think that extends to the whole transportation network.
Ed, we usually start with a check-in. What do you got?
Well, for sure, rideshare, that was brought up quite a bit tonight.
In a negative,
no, in a
it's
positive.
not working kind of
Well,
way?
it's not working, but they want to know why. I mean, why is carpooling and why is this idea of sharing with Zipcar and all these different manufacturers that are working in other cities, why is it not working? And the other point that was brought up from several people, but what are the actual dollars that we're missing, that we're losing because we don't have an efficient, usable transportation, whether it be public or bicycle,
What Yona was talking about on the Google Hangout, that there's economic benefit.
Economic benefit. Are we losing tourism?
Is that something that you guys talk about at all? Is that in your realm of discussion?
Yeah, I don't know if we look at it exactly that way. We talk about the economic impact. We talk about the cost to us in many different ways of transportation. Some tonight we've talked about the congestion on 270. So we look at congestion. We, as Alex pointed out, we look at levels of service. And as discussed tonight, there's some of that stuff that's evolving. I mean, we're trying to learn how to be a total transportation community, more or less just an engineering agency that, as Alex said, we can engineer whatever. So, and we're learning that the whatever is changing. The demand, the conversation that we're having here is changing. It's exciting times, I think.
I think the automobile, there's so many hidden costs of the automobile that are just hard to see. And one of them is it's essentially, it's an expensive import industry. You have to import all of this gas and most of the cars and vehicles that are made into the region. If you can substitute some public transit and cut down on those imports, it's an import substitution strategy. You can have more money in people's pockets that circulates in the regional economy and grow the regional economy. Now this is a hard, to explain this to the average citizen is tough, right? But there are these multiplier effects and import substitution.
Not that we have anything against the average citizen. I'd like to consider myself
it's only
one.
normal.
But in terms of one's incentives and one's priorities and demands on their life, this may not be
it's just a long argument you have to make.
Yeah.
Just to jump on Scott's point that he's been making over and over again, and he's been saying for a long time when you talk about, for example, trains or mass transit or something like that, state support is almost non-existent for that when you compare it to other states. In fact, in 2009, when there was money, federal stimulus money that went to Metro, I think it was like $5 or $10 million. It was like an all-out Armageddon fight for that, and that was considered to be a miracle that they got that amount of money.
I think it's important to actually talk about some of the real numbers, right? So what I usually say is that St. Louis has the best transportation system you can build, public transportation system you can build, only using local money, because we get no state support. Now, in Illinois and Chicago, why does Chicago have a dramatically better public transportation system than we have? It's not magic. It's because the state of Illinois, on a per-person basis, spends 208 times what the state of Missouri spends on public transportation. Now, Chicago also has local revenue that pays for that, but the state is making their great system possible. And the result of that is you have a growing region. You have an economy that you could probably argue is more vibrant than the St. Louis economy, and you have a robust system that can handle, like spikes in gas prices. It can support dense development.
I believe that the state of Illinois pays more money to Metro than the state of Missouri.
That's true.
And I say that because most of the track is on the Missouri side.
I don't even know how much money from the state goes to Metro.
$120,000.
Yeah, there is a real aversion in the state legislature to do that. Part of it is the rural-urban divide, but part of it is competition. I mean, Kansas City wants this very, very small amount of money. Even places like Springfield or Columbia wants it for mass transit.
We got to, I would say it's really important that we break through that logjam. And the idea that the gas tax is, it's limited to road and highway infrastructure is true, but that's really kind of a red herring on transportation funding, because the other $8 billion of general revenue that the Missouri legislature has to spend could easily be spent on that. It's just the choice is being made to not spend it in that way. And, at some point, we have to stop blaming it on like Republicans and rural voters and everything. The fact is, cities like Dallas are shooting past us in terms of public transit infrastructure, which is obviously a place that's very conservative. The state is still deciding to make those investments. And hopefully at some point, all of Missouri will realize that the urban areas are truly the economic drivers of the state, and it is not a bad investment to spend some money on their transportation
I
systems.
think to bring that to St. Louis, part of our problem, I mean, it's the State House is an issue in terms of getting money and state funding, but that comes from local priorities. And so, when Tiger Grants came up, what was the local funding priority? Highway ramps downtown. We didn't put in a Tiger Grant application for transit. We weren't ready to. We didn't have the political leadership locally in an urban environment to ask for the right thing. And as a urban area, as a metro area, we're horribly divided. I mean, try to get someone from St. Louis County or St. Charles County to go to the State House with someone like Scott from the city and ask for transit funding. It just doesn't happen. And Ed mentioned, are we missing out on tourists or something by not building this or that? If anyone can think of a city they like to visit, it's not because they have great tourist attractions, it's because it's a great city to live in. You go to Boston, you go to San Francisco, you go to New York because it's a great place to live and you want to experience what people who live there experience. We need to build a place where people want to live. We want to build a place where it's fun to be, not a place dotted with tourist attractions. We have 17 silver bullets lying around downtown. Everyone's still leaving. It's not, we have the formula wrong, we have the priorities wrong. The other thing I was going to bring up is that what we're doing in terms of local priorities is handicapped by our regional kind of political institutions. So, not to vilify East-West Gateway or Metro Transit, but if you go to Metro Transit and say, why isn't your long-term plan heavy on streetcars? They say, well, that's not a regional transit solution, it's too slow. Well, maybe the city needs an urban transit solution. We don't have anyone investing in really focused, dense transit system. The nature of our institutions are to serve everyone kind of equally and dole out this here and dole out that there. And it's not a formula that's ever going to produce neighborhoods that are dense enough to get rid of your car.
Just to break through a little bit of pessimism, though, the St. Louis City and County have.
Pessimistic. I'm sticking with this. I'm building up to this.
Since we supported Prop A a few years ago, it's 63% in the middle of a recession to tax ourselves for our public transit system in St. Louis County, and it had passed before in the city. So actually, we're among the leaders in the nation in local financing at the city and county level, and we were pretty clever in getting that first line in there back in '91, and this new generation of light rail. So I just want to put a note of optimism in there. We do some good stuff, right?
The danger is part of the problem is Prop A passes, but now the county is paying the majority of transit taxes, local transit taxes. So there's a lot of pressure for the next expansion, whether it's bus rapid transit, which every line is an interstate line going out to the suburbs, or the next Metrolink line to go to Westport or something like that. That's where the pressure is now, because that's where the funding's coming from. And that's not a positive thing for city neighborhoods.
If we had a decent federal system New Starts program, I think it would actually privilege the north-south line as the next line, because it would, and that's how that's how the priorities operate on that. Let's just hope the federal government has some funding for this.
This kind of goes back to the conversation about, do we hear what people want, or does government sort of writ large hear what people want? And I think if you look at some possible projects in St. Louis, like the Loop Trolley and like the Midtown streetcar, government is not hearing what people want. And there are people on the ground choosing to tax themselves more just to get their line down their street. Institutions saying, we will just pay out of our pocket to build this line because we think it'll be good for our institution and good for the economy, along this corridor. People want these systems. And right now, Missouri gives us no way to pay for them. And the federal, and without the money from Missouri, it's very hard to get the federal government to give us money for these projects either.
Well, to kind of tie to Natalie, I want to ask on the same note, are the people that you're working with in Beyond Housing, are their voices being heard in this conversation at all? Or what do you think that they want and need, the people you work with?
I would say their voices are being heard because there are organizations like Beyond Housing who are forcing their voices to be heard. So the systems are not set up. The timelines for projects like Complete Streets make authentic community engagement very difficult. In terms of what they're looking for, I think they're looking for small changes that would help their everyday life where their transit already is.
You mentioned the bathrooms at the station last week.
Bathrooms at the station. Please cover my bus stop because I don't want to get wet when it rains. So little things like that. Of course, over time, Metrolink's really popular. Bus rapid transit would really help our folks, but they're really worried about the today and the tomorrow, and those are the things that they're focused on.